Hello there, little masters, and welcome to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight we'll send Bilbo to fetch the good stuff from the cellar.
Maybe he'll come back with more cakes and ale and coffee. West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Balin to my Dwalin, Alan Sisto.
Ah, thank you, Sean.
Well, your name actually kind of rhymes with Dwalin's name.
Dwalin and Alan.
Alan.
I may be the older one, but at least I'm wise and kindly. Folks, hopefully you've had a chance to enjoy the first episode of Season 2 of the Prancing Pony Podcast. That was our preview of The Hobbit, and we discussed some of the history of Tolkien's writing and publication, and discussed the impact of this truly groundbreaking story.
I'd say you combine that with our last episode of Season 1, which was that epic interview with Corey Olsen, and you know we're about to hit the ground running here. But we are really excited to get to this episode, really getting back to what we enjoy most, which is our chapter-by-chapter walkthrough of Tolkien's works.
That's absolutely right, Sean. We really do enjoy doing our special episodes, of course. The two video episodes discussing the films, those were a lot of fun.
They were.
And Corey Olsen can come back here any time he wants. But, here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, our job is to walk you through Tolkien's works in a unique, insightful, and, hopefully humorous way.
Hopefully.
Laughing with us, not at us.
Right, exactly. No unintentional humor. And before we give ourselves a chance to test that, I think we want to go ahead and introduce a new segment for this episode, don't we? This is going to be Today in Tolkien History.
We've been talking about some new segments to go along with our Tolkien fun facts, and this is the first one up. And a new segment means new segment music. For Today in Tolkien History. Sean, what do you have for us?
I love it. Well, this episode is releasing on Sunday, October 8th, 2017. And 80 years ago today is actually when C.S. Lewis anonymously reviewed The Hobbit for the London Times. Now, those of you who listened to our last episode know that we actually mentioned this quote in our previous episode, but it's worth saying again. In his anonymous review on October 8th, C.S. Lewis said, "In this book, a number of good things, never before united, have come together. A fund of humor, an understanding of children, and a happy fusion of the scholars with the poet's grasp of mythology."
Indeed. And in 1953 on this date, Tolkien was reading the page proofs and looking at the art for the Fellowship of the Ring. On October 7th, he'd been sent revised drawings for approval, and the publisher was trying to get an idea of printing costs. They'd estimated the length of the first two volumes, 424 and 352 pages respectively, but they needed a copy of Tolkien's typescript for the third. Now get this, the next day, October 9th, he wrote back asking if he could deliver the typescript later in the month in person, as he didn't have a second copy and didn't want to trust the original to the post. Apparently he doesn't have drop.
Can't say I blame him.
Can't say I blame him. Apparently he didn't have Dropbox.
I know.
I mean, seriously, just stick it on a thumb drive and pop it in the mail.
Come on.
This is a fun little segment, and I think we're going to enjoy having this moment or this day in Tolkien history.
Definitely. Yep. Looking forward to doing some more of those as soon as we can. So stay tuned for more of those and more other new segments.
That's
in future
right.
episodes.
We do have more in store for you.
We've got a couple of other new things lined up. We've also got a few more of those Tolkien fun facts that we did last time. We haven't done nearly enough of over the last 50-some episodes, 53 episodes.
We really haven't. You're right.
And in fact, on that topic, I actually want to amend the Tolkien fun fact from our last episode. Last time, you'll remember that I gave that story told to Tolkien by his Aunt Grace about the origins of the Tolkien family in Saxony, and the idea that the name came from the German Tolkien, hope I'm pronouncing that right, which means foolhardy. And as it turns out, that's certainly the story in Humphrey Carpenter, but as it turns out, there actually has been some really recent, in the last year, genealogical research that's been done by a well-respected Polish artist and Tolkien researcher, whose name, I also hope I'm getting this right, his name is Ryszard Dzierżyński. Ryszard Dzierżyński, I believe, is how...
Okay. I'm going to let you stand on that.
And I apologize to Mr. Dzierżyński if I'm mispronouncing that. But he's got a blog about Tolkien that's partly in Polish, partly in English. And he actually has started to suggest that the Tolkiens may actually have come not from Saxony, but actually from East Prussia in what is now Poland. So his neck of the woods.
Oh, wow.
Dzierżyński believes that the Tolkiens actually emigrated from the city of Danzig, or now Gdansk, in the 18th century, and that the name Tolkien actually has Slavic origins. And it's fascinating stuff. definitely advise anybody to go out and check it out. I would say, for me, it's not up to me to say whether the matter is settled, but I mean, I think he does make a very compelling case that I think a lot of people in the Tolkien community are taking seriously.
That's really fascinating. I gotta have to look into that myself. Of course, if that does end up being proven to be the case, it doesn't change the fact that Tolkien himself believed that other story about his origin.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's true. And I think Tolkien actually liked that other story about his origins.
Yeah.
I mean,
who wouldn't?
We talked last time about how, yeah, true. We talked last time about how much he played on that meaning foolhardy in a few places in his writing.
Right.
But it's an interesting development, something I've been reading about here and there I know there's been a lot of discussion about it on the Tolkien Society page on Facebook. And again, all this is coming out just within the last year. But I hadn't remembered it when we recorded, and one of our Twitter followers, Trotter, I want to thank Trotter for pointing that out to me, reminding me of it in a totally offhand conversation recently. So, so thanks, Trotter, for reminding me of that. I'm glad to share that with folks.
And we can find out more at Drzynski's blog, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put up a link to his blog in our show notes.
Good,
as I said, it's bilingual. Some of it's in Polish and some of it's in English. But I would say that the parts in English that I can read are really, really interesting.
Well, I didn't know you could read Polish, so
no, not at all. So let's see. There's one other thing I wanted to do before we jump in here today. I also wanted to make a brief correction to our last episode.
Correction?
We always hate to make.
I thought it was an amendment.
No, this one is a straight up correction, my friend.
Yeah, it is.
We always hate to make a mistake, but I think when we do, we're pretty good at admitting it.
Eventually.
In the last episode, we made a very brief mention of an early 20th century author who was reported to have had an influence on Tolkien. And we mispronounced this author's name as Lord Dunsany. That is actually not the correct way to say his name.
Nope.
In our defense, it is a common pronunciation. I've heard it a lot of places, but it is wrong, at least according to the man himself. I actually found some text from a letter that Lord Dunsany had written to a friend where he said, "The one way that nobody should pronounce my name is the way people do who call it Dunsany. I pronounce it Dunsany with the accent on the second syllable, which is pronounced say, the first syllable rhyming with gun." Which is a very ominous way to end that.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So
that thing that I shall point at your head if you mispronounce my name?
If you call me Dunsany one more time. So there you have it. Apologies to fans of Lord Dunsany and the estate of Lord Dunsany.
Yes.
Clearly someone I need to spend a little bit more time learning about.
There you go.
And
there you go.
And I promise both Alan and I will spend 3 nights in the mispronunciation penitence chamber to think about our mistakes.
Tell me we don't have to serve those sentences at the same time.
No, not
Good,
at all.
Good.
No, that would be the end of this podcast. I think,
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So anyway, with all that stuff out of the way, why don't we go ahead and get straight into one of the most famous stories of all time by starting with one of the most famous openings of all time.
Oh, man, I got to tell you, Sean, I have been looking forward to this since we first started this podcast.
I know you have.
I'm nervous, of course. That's the thing. I mean, Rob Inglis does this so well in the audiobook that I feel I'm doomed from the start. But, I have to give it a try. Fortunately, I don't think there's anything in here that is going to force me to spend time in the mispronunciation penitence chamber. That'll happen when we introduce the dwarves. But
absolutely. Yep.
So for now, here we go.
All right.
In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door, like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened on to a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel, without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on and on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles round called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these. Wardrobes. He had whole rooms devoted to clothes. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set round windows looking over his garden and meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking him. This is a story of how a Baggins had an adventure, and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost the neighbors' respect, but he gained, well, you will see whether he gained anything in the end. Man, what a passage.
I think you did admirably.
I mean, you almost have that stuff memorized. It's so rich,
Oh, yeah.
and we've read it
Yeah.
so many times. And there's such a visual associated with it. You just can't help but see yourself going down this hall.
It's such a shift from, we've been spending so much time with the Silmarillion, and it's such a shift from, that, very high mythological style of the Silmarillion.
The
to something
30,000-foot
that's-
overview where this entire book would have taken about 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, well, and not only in the amount of detail, but just the conversational nature of it.
The tone is so different.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just very approachable. It's not surprising this is the first book that many people read by Tolkien. It is
That's
the
true.
most approachable one. It's certainly the one that you can trust a kid to understand. But yeah,
try
it's so
reading
great.
the Silmarillion to your 8-year-old,
No. Although I have done it to my children when they were very little, too little to even understand. I did it for myself,
course.
just so they could hear my voice.
All they heard was wah, 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 wah,
Right,
wah,
yeah.
wah, wah.
They just liked hearing Daddy's voice, but
Of course.
it was fun.
Or so you think.
I've always assumed. Yeah, but it's so vivid, and it's just such a
It is.
great. Man, the narrative style here is so strong, and we'll see that just
It is.
throughout. It's just a great narrative voice. It's a lot of fun to read aloud.
It is, and it's incredibly the descriptive nature of it is so vivid. To be able to imagine these things. This is, of course, long before the films. You can imagine this because it's detailed so perfectly.
Yeah,
Yeah, really is.
yeah. The picture is clearly painted by the words. Yeah,
Yes, it is.
yeah.
There's
And a
so
great
much
introduction
there,
to the character.
Yes, it
A
is.
lot of things I think we need to talk about, don't we?
I agree. I think the very first thing that jumps out that we see, especially as we see through the rest of the chapter, is this theme of comfort. It starts
It
out
was
right
a
there.
hobbit hole, and that means comfort.
Means comfort. That's a very significant thing, and we'll
It
see
is.
going through that comfort. Comfort is a big, big thing. We see it again. It's a very comfortable tunnel.
Yep.
It's definitely something to catch on to.
That is a word that appears right there at the beginning, and spoiler alert, it appears at the very end of this chapter too,
Yes,
and it appears
does.
several times throughout. And you really want to pay attention to it whenever it's mentioned, and
Or its
notice its
opposite.
opposites. Yeah.
Right.
You want to notice things like uncomfortable. You even want to notice things that don't have the word comfort in them, but that mean
Right,
something.
that are
in that,
synonyms.
Yeah, when he talks about things being awkward or feeling flummoxed or confused, you really want to pick up on that stuff.
Yeah.
But for now, I think let's just start off by saying Bilbo is starting in a place that is comfortable, a comfortable tunnel without smoke.
Yeah, without smoke. I love that.
I love that. It's great.
It really is. Here's the one thing it lacks, and then it has all these other things: the paneled walls and the floors that are tiled and carpeted. In other words, you're not walking on a dirt floor in a tunnel. You've got these, nice paneled walls, the wainscoting, and the
Well, because he starts with a
probably got
hole in the
crown
ground,
molding.
and so you would be forgiven for thinking it's just a hole that somebody dug out of the ground. But no, hole. Tolkien has actually appropriated this word hole and is using it for something that it doesn't really mean in modern English. He's using it to mean a house, a hobbit house that is underground.
An amazing place, and such a unique architectural design, and I don't just mean that from the exterior, but this idea of everything being on a single level and really on a single hall, one single passageway. But what does this house tell us about him? I mean, not only do we have these comfortable things like paneled walls and floors of tile and carpet, but we have, look at the rooms that he has. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course he's got bedrooms and bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of pantries. These.
And let's remember, cellars, primarily would be used for storing, ale and things like that. Probably also some vegetables.
Pantries would be probably more
lots
with the food.
Of these. Yeah. I mean, I guess I tend to think of cellars as being, where you keep the ale, but that's just because that's where I keep my ale, is in the cellar. But I guess, I'm also thinking of things like maybe like root cellars and things like that, but maybe that's not a thing.
That's true too.
Maybe that's not a thing in England. I don't know. But pantries, lots of pantries, wardrobes, whole rooms devoted to clothes.
Again,
like
plural,
my grandparents.
rooms devoted to clothes.
Yeah. I mean, and you get so much about, I mean, obviously he likes good food. He likes his beer. He likes his clothes, but he also likes things simple, doesn't he? It's simple and it's domestic. No, I don't want to climb any
very
stairs.
Domestic. Yeah, I don't.
No climbing stairs.
Right.
Everything.
There's not even multiple halls. This is, one hall. Everything's off the hall. Seventh door on the left, ninth door on the right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And with a keen eye for a keen eye for like what are the best rooms? Where the good, put all the good rooms on the left hand side. There's a real sense of hierarchy in terms of the quality of his rooms. I mean, that speaks to a very well-to-do hobbit, as we find out he is.
Very well-to-do, and that's the start of the next paragraph. I mean, he is rich. He is a hobbit of leisure. This is the Downton Abbey of the Shire.
Right. Right.
Except no upstairs or downstairs. And just in the sense that he is a very wealthy man.
Yeah.
I mean, look at multiple kitchens, multiple dining rooms. He lives by himself, folks. This is a bachelor pad with multiple kitchens, multiple dining rooms, multiple pantries, and multiple wardrobes.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, very, very interesting stuff. And we also get a very interesting narrative technique. We talked about the descriptive nature, but there's something else that we see in this passage, especially towards the end. We see this kind of breaking of the fourth wall. Tolkien directly addressing the reader.
Yeah. You will see whether he gained anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it adds to that very conversational tone. You kind of feel like
that accessibility.
There's that accessibility. You kind of feel like you're sitting in a room with the narrator, and the narrator's just telling you this story.
That's exactly right.
And
that makes sense
maybe
for
that
writing a
owes something
children's story.
Exactly. And it probably makes sense when it's a children's story that he spent a lot of time just telling to his children.
Yeah. I mean, that, after all, is the origin of this. I mean,
But it's something you never see in Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion, where it's much more of a conventional narrative style in Lord of the Rings.
Can you imagine breaking the fourth wall in the Silmarillion? After Feanor has broken the oath and Tolkien just kind of breaks the fourth wall, you do realize what an idiot he is.
This guy is bad.
Do I need to point this out any more clearly?
Yeah, FYI, he's a bad guy.
Oh man, you can imagine what Mandos thinks of him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a fun thing? Take a chapter of the Silmarillion and rewrite it in
the Hobbit style. That would be a lot of fun.
That might be a fun little project. Probably violates copyright though.
Some fanfic writer is listening to this right now and is like, "Oh, I'm going to do that next."
I'm not sure fanfic writers listen to us.
There might be a few. Another thing I've noticed in here is the simplicity of names. While we're comparing this to things like
The Hill.
The Hill. Do we get? I think very soon. Yeah, in the next paragraph, we're going to get the water.
The water.
Later on, we get the blue. Not only are we far from the the Quenya or Sindarin place names that we see in Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings.
We don't even get descriptive names.
We don't even get descriptions. Exactly.
Right.
We're going to see, it's not going to be Erebor, it's going to be the Lonely Mountain. It's going to be Dale, not Imlad. But this Bilbo's world is, at this point, is so small that most locations really only need an article.
Yeah.
Just the hill, the water. And actually, one of our listeners not long ago asked us about this. Jeff in New York asked us, What do you make of this? The hill, the water, the blue. And I think the answer is just Bilbo's world is just so small. That there's either only one hill, only one
or
water,
there's only one hill,
or there's
that
only
matters.
one that everybody cares about.
Right, exactly.
So it's just it's such a familiar place that description is not needed. Further description is not needed.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It really is, and it's so very, very different from the rest of the works.
It really is.
We talked last episode about how we're going to approach this, how we're going to approach The Hobbit, that we're going to approach it as part of the legendarium. We're not going to try to isolate it, though we will try to make the story stand out and help you to follow this story, even though we're plugging it into the rest. We're going to
try and have it both ways is what we're going to try and do.
But that is exactly what we're going to try to do.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments where you can't help but compare it to other elements of the legendarium, and it's so drastically different in that style.
Yeah.
The hill, the water. I mean, can you? I can't even imagine.
No, you can't. Yeah. You can't. I mean, the only thing you get when you get to Lord of the Rings, this whole area is called the Shire, which of course is something that's not a name that's ever used in this book.
No.
But yeah, you do get it there. So there's like that kind of contrast between the Shire and all these other places with these,
right, with actual names,
very exotic names and very descriptive
Eriador
names.
and Gondor and yeah, my goodness.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So after that, we get this little question about, well, what is a hobbit? Really, in 1937, that's a wonderful question because nobody knew the answer.
Right.
What do we get? Well, without breaking out the actual text, without reading through that, we see some detail. We find out that their feet are hairy, but they're, interestingly, not large. There's nothing describing their feet as big.
We've talked about this before, and
Hildebrandt. It's the brothers Hildebrandt.
It is the Hildebrands, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't really have that in my head that hobbits have large feet, but I know lots of people do, and I guess it's just because
in the films, certainly, they put swim fins on those feet. I mean,
did they?
Those things were huge. Oh, yeah.
I never noticed.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I can't imagine being stealthy if your feet are as large as, let's say, your entire lower leg. I mean, that's about how big they are. It looks like their feet are as long as from their knee to their ankle. I can't imagine being very stealthy with feet that size.
Yeah, no, I totally agree about that.
But yeah, that's certainly the impression that people have, and I don't know if it's something they can get rid of. It's kind of like the pointy ears thing, Everybody assumes that, and yet there's really very little textual evidence of that. I think
there's one letter where he says that hobbits have only slightly pointed ears, slightly elvish ears. That's the only time he mentions either hobbits or elves having pointed ears.
Yeah,
And so it's really hard. Who knows what to make of that, honestly?
Right. But certainly the feet. There's nothing about the feet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're right.
Big.
You're right.
But they are hairy, and that
they're little. Half our height.
Yeah, very small. I mean, 3 foot tall then?
3 feet,
I mean, yeah. I love that their feet are, of course, very leathery soles. They have the thick hair on the top. So I'm assuming there probably are no cobblers in the Shire.
Probably not.
Not.
Probably don't need anybody making shoes.
Long, clever fingers.
I like this mention earlier about there's little or no magic about them.
Yes.
Except the ordinary everyday sort.
Yeah. Of course, ordinary everyday magic. We all know about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's just, this idea that they can disappear quietly and quickly. It's sort of it almost feels like, there's no magic about them except this thing that's just basically just part of their nature.
Right, natural.
We spent so much time talking about elvish nature and mannish nature. Then we could talk a little bit about hobbitish nature. They're just close to the earth, and so they can disappear quietly and quickly. In
a very literal sense as well as a kind of a metaphorical sense.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, and of course they have
they're close to the ground, low to the ground.
And interesting when he says making a noise like elephants, which they can hear a mile off. This is one of those things where you're going to find a few anachronistic terms, words that probably, if he was writing this in the style of Lord of the Rings, you wouldn't have seen that word. You might have seen Oliphant, but not elephant.
Right.
Or maybe Mumakil. We'll run across a few others.
Yeah, there'll be
a few others of those. Tobacco, for instance, I think we'll be seeing very shortly. We'll get into that when we get there.
There's a big anachronism later in this chapter. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, there are a few, but
but he does that a lot. I mean, I think it's part of that. It's part of that breaking of the fourth. Part of that accessibility. It's part of that. Part of that. Maybe not breaking in that case, but sort of a nod to the fourth wall. He's bringing it down to the level of our time. And it's a reminder that this is a story that's been translated from, Red Book of Westmarch, something that's come down to us from who knows
from
how
who
far
knows
back,
when. But, it's also a reminder that this wasn't originally part of the Legendarium.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
I mean, this was not intended to be part of that world. It was certainly inspired by that world. We'll get to more of that later. I mean, like throughout the entire season, we'll get to more of that, not just this episode.
True.
But yeah, it's a sign that this was not to be originally placed in that same context. So
right, yeah.
Let's see. They're a little chubby. That makes sense. When you're short, it's where are you going to?
Yeah, especially
people
if you got that many
6'5",
pantries and you love food and beer that much.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're 3 foot tall and you eat a lot, things are good. I love the way they dress, green and yellow and bright colors. That color
bright colors,
palette.
but earth tones. I would point out.
Earth tones. That's exactly right. Kind of natural tones. They're not chiefly neon and pink.
I mean, not like they're going to get synthetic dyes or anything, but
no
synthetic pigments.
That's a very good point. They're not ordering plaid off of Amazon.
Right. No.
Long, clever brown fingers. What do you make of that?
I think they're they're good at. I mean, and maybe I'm bringing too much of Lord of the Rings into this, but you think of somebody like Sam, who's a gardener. They're people who are close to the earth. They've got brown fingers, probably from being out in the sun all the time because they spend a lot of time out of doors.
Exactly.
Long and clever. Maybe they're not just digging roots out of the dirt. Maybe they're they're using them for a variety of other things. But
probably very good piano players if there are any.
Yeah, and maybe it's just kind of part of that that halfling dexterity. If we want to put it in a
that's
like
what I'm thinking, but in a
sense.
D&D context.
Yeah. They're able to disappear quietly and quickly, but they also have clever fingers,
So they can do magic tricks.
Right.
Ordinary, everyday magic tricks.
Right. They're
good-natured faces. I mean, these are little people that you're going to trust right away. Mm-hmm. Unlike the dwarves, who you're going to look at and go, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
That's not
it's
how
true.
Ala's description is, going back to the description of the creation of the dwarves. I don't think good-natured faces is part of it.
No.
This is, part of their descent from men, I think, and it's easy for men to see in something descended from themselves, something that they like. The laughing of the deep, fruity laughs, and the reference here to dinner being twice a day when they
Which
can
they
get it.
twice a day when they can get it, yeah.
Isn't that interesting? We don't get a lot of talk about 11sies or second breakfast.
No, there's not. Right.
I mean, there is a second breakfast, but it's not. Well, we'll get
Bilbo
to that.
Bilbo is about to. I think he's about to have a second breakfast in the next chapter. But yeah, it's not.
Right.
It's not an official mealtime.
It's not like he's about to have lunch or
right.
he's about to have breakfast. He's about to have a second breakfast.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, there's this idea that there's 7 meals a day and that kind of thing. But
yeah,
they definitely like food, no doubt about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you've got a little passage that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say they just like simple pleasures in life.
They do.
They're not like elves who are going to they're not like Noldor who are going to try and make these beautiful crafts all day.
Right.
They're not going to sit around and contemplate Manwë all day. They're just going to OMG
Manwë.
They're just going to enjoy life. They just enjoy life in the simplest way. Just good food.
Good friends.
Good friends, good times with people.
They're very sociable. We don't see that in this particular passage, but certainly Bilbo loves to have visitors.
Yeah.
And we see that shown through here. But
yeah,
they're really. It makes you want to live in the Shire, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It makes you want to be a hobbit.
It makes me want to be friends with hobbits, if nothing else.
Oh yeah, great place to go hang out with and have some great food and.
Yep.
Laugh a lot and just sit and relax in the beauty of their gardens and farms.
Yep, exactly.
But
But
you
now,
do have a
I
passage
guess,
to read for us. Yeah, your first little section here.
Yeah.
Tell us about his ancestors.
A little bit about the family. As I was saying, the mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins, that is, was the famous Belladonna Took, one of the 3 remarkable daughters of the Old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water, the small river that ran at the foot of the hill. It was often said, in other families, that long ago one of the Took ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That was, of course, absurd, but certainly there was still something not entirely hobbit-like about them. And once in a while, members of the Took clan would go and have adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed it up. But the fact remained that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Bagginses, though they were undoubtedly richer.
Ooh, and that's saying something.
Yeah, no kidding, yeah. Yeah.
One of 3 remarkable daughters of the Old Took. Just like in the Silmarillion, he starts hiding things that you wish you found out more about. Like, who are the other 2? And what made them remarkable?
That's true, yeah.
He gives you this sense that there's more to the story.
Yeah, that's true. And more to the story, and you wonder if there's more to the story about this, one of the Took ancestors taking a fairy wife.
Yeah.
We talked about this not too long ago. I think it's, the fact that it's said in other families, not the Took family. I think it's probably indicating that it, probably didn't happen. But, and it says it was, of course, absurd. But, it was a way of explaining just this weird little
slightly
tick
off
in the
nature.
Took nature. Yeah. Something queer.
Something elf-like. Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, this is really the beginning of one of those themes that we're going to see a lot
ding, ding.
throughout
Yes,
this book, which is this whole idea of this conflict between these 2 halves of Bilbo's nature, the Baggins half and the Took half. The simple, stay-at-home, respectable Baggins with this adventurous, kind of wild-haired Took side. Yeah, eccentric, a good word for it. I love that because we're not quite seeing it yet. We're going to see it very strongly in just a few pages.
Oh, yeah.
But it's something that we're going to see throughout the book, and it's something that I know it's something I feel like I relate to. I think it's something that a lot of readers can relate to, even if we don't have these 2, storied branches of ancestors. We've got 2 sides of our personality debating these choices we make, and I think we can all relate to that idea.
You've got a conservative, risk-averse side, and you've got this adventurous side, and who's going to win?
Yeah. And the reality is, for most of us, it's going to be different. It's going to be different sides at different times. And one of the things that makes Bilbo such a wonderfully well fleshed out character is the fact that you really do see those motivations at work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you see him bouncing back and forth. That's the thing. This Took Baggins conflict that we'll see, and we will see it a lot. It'll be pointed out explicitly, and it'll also be pointed out, as we imply things, as we infer things, I should say.
Yep.
We'll see it throughout the book, and Tolkien does this masterful job of never really resolving it. Yeah. There's always a conflict, it seems.
It's not like the Took nature takes over, he goes on the adventure, and then he's just all Took the whole time.
Right. The Baggins returns, and then the Took returns, and the Baggins returns. There's always this conflict inside Bilbo.
It's a constant push-pull, yeah.
Yeah. And he does it masterfully. I mean, to the point that you don't notice that, I don't think, unless you're really kind of looking for it. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Or if you're looking for it. I mean, there are a few times where he is very specific to point it out, but there are a lot of times where he's not, and you kind of read between the lines and you see it.
Absolutely.
One of the other things
Go ahead.
One of the other things I love about the Tooks is that they live across the water.
Yes.
What I love about that is that makes them exotic, but in a very small way.
Yeah, exactly.
They're those weirdos from across the water, but it's really just like, a mile and a half away,
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness.
I love that. It just
the small
reminds
river that
you
ran at the foot of the hill.
Right, exactly. Yeah, not even a mile and a half away, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I love that. It's just it's the greatest expression of just how small the Hobbit world is, how small Bilbo's world is.
How absolutely tiny, and yet how drastically that's going to change. Now, we do get some more about the Baggins side of it, right? This is the Took side. We get that they go on adventures. We get that the family hushes it up. They're very, very rich, but they're not as respected by other
Right.
hobbits.
Right.
Now, we're not going to read the next bit, but we learn a little bit about the Baggins side. His father built this hobbit hole for Belladonna. Partly with her money, which
I love that.
That's the best way to build it.
It's hilarious.
I know, totally hilarious. And that this is the most luxurious hobbit hole to be found really in the area.
Yeah.
And so, here he is living the high life, really.
Yeah.
Totally relaxed, totally gets to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He is a man of leisure. And it's very clear that in order to get him to do anything, they're going to have to Gandalf's going to really have to kind of rock his world a little bit, because he's very comfortable where he's at.
He's the spitting image of his father, and he seems to act just like his father.
And how is his father described? A second edition of his solid and comfortable father.
Yeah.
There's a reason why that word is used.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So at this point, Bilbo's 50 years old. Now, I think we find out later that 50 is probably more like, 30 in our age? 30,
I think
35?
so, yeah.
Because they come of age 33.
33, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, their 20s are kind of more like their teens.
Their
or
teens,
like our
exactly.
teens. And I think we get that in Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, yeah. So 50 is not as old as me, though I am kind of pushing that number. Not yet, dang it. But it's probably more like, mid-30s.
Yeah.
So he is he's a boomerang. He's come back home. He probably went off to grad school, has too much debt, and so he's living in mom and dad's house. But of course they're gone.
But they're gone, so he's not confined to the basement anymore. If there was a basement, which there isn't.
That's right, because there are no stairs for the Hobbit.
Right. Yeah. But he has settled down. He has apparently settled down immovably. He is
immovably. Isn't that a wonderful phrase there?
This is my life. I'm good with it.
I am totally good with it. I'm a bachelor. I'm in the nicest house in the neighborhood. Location. I mean, the equity in this home is incredible.
Yeah.
He's just
I'm good.
absolutely
I don't
loving
need anything
life.
else out of life.
And he doesn't want anything else.
No, not at all.
No.
But then
something happens. So we're not going to read the next paragraph because we want to make sure that we can get through these chapters in a reasonable amount of time. Nor do we want to get a friendly phone call from the estate because we're reading too much of the books.
No.
Gandalf shows up. And I love this line, though, and I'm going to mention this one, that in the quiet of the world when there is less noise and more green. I love that phrase.
Boy, that just feels like a Tolkien sentence right there.
Doesn't it? That is Tolkien's sentiment right there.
Yeah.
And then at that point, that's when hobbits were more numerous and more prosperous.
Yep.
So Bilbo's outside having a smoke, and Gandalf comes by. And there's a little line here, but before I read again, that I want to mention that if you heard a quarter of what I've heard, and again, this is Tolkien breaking that fourth wall, speaking directly to the reader, and I've only heard very little of all there is to hear, you'd be prepared for any sort of remarkable tale. So here's a warning. This guy brings stories with him.
He makes things happen. Yeah.
He does. He stirs the pot,
Yep.
And yeah, so it's basically heads up. Bilbo doesn't know what's coming. So I'm going to go ahead and read, starting with Gandalf's arrival.
Okay.
All that the unsuspecting Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, a silver scarf over which his long white beard hung down below his waist, and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining, and the grass was very green. But Gandalf looked at him from under long, bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not, or that you feel good this morning, or that it is a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo, "and a very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors into the bargain. If you have a pipe about you, sit down and have a fill of mine. There's no hurry. We have all the day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on a seat by his door, crossed his legs, and blew out a beautiful gray ring of smoke that sailed up into the air without breaking and floated away over the hill. "Very pretty," said Gandalf. "But I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share in an adventure that I am arranging, and it's very difficult to find anyone." "I should think so, in these parts. We're plain quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them," said our Mr. Baggins, and stuck one thumb behind his braces and blew out another even bigger smoke ring. The arrival of Gandalf.
The arrival of Gandalf.
Trying to picture Gandalf as anybody other than Ian McKellen is nigh unto impossible.
It is very, very hard. He's owned that role so much for
He
6
really
movies.
has. I'm trying desperately not to do a voice like his because I can't sound like Ian McKellen, so I'm not going to.
No.
But it's hard because I want to.
Right? Yeah. Well, he did sound so good, but no.
Man, didn't he?
Yeah.
But what a great interchange.
Absolutely. And there's just so much there. I mean,
there is again another lot of stuff to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, starting with Bilbo's good morning. Good morning, and he meant it. He means it. He's feeling good. He's happy.
Yeah.
He sees this guy. Okay, yeah. Let me be nice. Let me be polite. Is really the way to say it. He means it as a polite greeting.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about it, though, is when you say something as a polite greeting every day, you at a certain point you stop meaning it literally, don't you?
It tends to lose meaning, right?
Exactly. You start. It's like when you say, "Hey, how you doing?"
Right.
Or howdy. How do you do?
Howdy. Oh, you are in Texas.
I am a Texan now, at least.
Howdy.
You stop meaning that literally. You
do. You're right. Because if somebody actually answered you, not that great.
Honestly, I'm really not doing that well.
Arthritis is acting up, and my,
Yeah, my acid reflux and it's like, no, dude, I don't really want to know.
I'm just asking you to say, "Doing good. How about you?"
Right, exactly.
It means nothing.
It means nothing. Exactly.
It is a pleasantry.
It is a pleasantry. And what is the first thing Gandalf says?
Boy.
What do you mean?
Yeah. And I love that. Bilbo meant good morning.
He meant
and Gandalf says, "What do you mean?"
What do you mean? Exactly. And he spends, he spends a couple of sentences challenging him on this pleasantry, forcing him to really think about what exactly he means when he says good morning. And it actually, on first reading, it comes across as either just incredibly thick or incredibly rude. But what he's actually doing is he's really forcing Bilbo. He's kind of pushing Bilbo out of his comfort zone because Bilbo's gotten very comfortable with his life, and he's gotten very comfortable with these pleasantries that he surrounds himself with. And he's forcing Bilbo to kind of think about language in a different way. And I think the fact that Tolkien was a philologist really, we should think about what that means.
I agree.
And I love that. And he's going to do this for a little while,
and on the second part of the conversation too.
But Bilbo is unfazed at this point. At this point, it's like, oh well, all of them at once.
Yeah. Which is a nice way of dismissing the challenge of the question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
committing.
he does really mean a little bit of each, but it's really,
of
I
course
think, an easier way for him to
there is a little
back
bit
out
of. If you are a genuine person when you say good morning to somebody, you do mean it in a small way, a little bit of each.
Yeah.
But
that's
Gandalf's
true.
Gandalf wants him to commit to something. I mean, here's a guy who probably has not committed to anything in a long time. He's gotten very comfortable.
He doesn't need to. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All of them at once. Now,
but he is nothing if not polite. I mean, hey, you got a pipe? Come have some of my tobacco.
Yeah. I don't know who you are, but come and grab a seat and have a smoke.
Yeah. It is
speaking
tobacco.
of which, tobacco. I think that's the next thing to talk about is the use of the word tobacco. First of all, this is a clear reminder that pipeweed is in fact nicotiana.
Yeah.
That it is in fact tobacco and nothing more, just to be very clear. But it's interesting that he chooses to use that word. And, and this is, intentional. He had the chance to revise this when he revised the text for the second edition after rewriting chapter 5 to make it fit with the Lord of the Rings. He could have also decided at that point to change these anachronistic terms. He didn't. So there's a reason behind that. And I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, that accessibility, that relatability, trying to make it feel a little less alien.
Yes. He wants it to feel familiar.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why he starts with The Hobbit. Bilbo is a familiar character, even if none of us are rich enough to have the nicest house in town and not have to work.
Yeah. No, I think it's true.
But the comfort.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's very true. I think by the time this airs, I'll have a Prancing Pony Pondering up about the first sentence of The Hobbit, the first 10 words.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And there's I hope it turns out awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your faith.
Total confidence in you. Total confidence.
But this first sentence really is a transformative sentence. It immediately brings us into Tolkien's world. And yet at the same time, the world we find there when we first arrive is very much like our own. It's very comfortable. It's very relatable. It really isn't until Gandalf and the dwarves come along. That is very intentional. So I think you're right. I think he is intentionally trying to make it less alien. He's trying to make it more relatable because he wants us to relate to Bilbo. He wants us to identify with him.
You know, that was one of our gripes about the film, right? Was that the film shouldn't have been called The Hobbit. It just should have been called The Dwarves and that Bilbo guy.
Right.
Because it was more about the dwarves, which that's fine. That's neither here nor there in terms of this discussion. But it's a reminder that from the book perspective, Bilbo is the character that we as the readers are supposed to inhabit. You know, we're supposed to be able to step into his shoes, identify. And that's why it starts out with this super comfortable, super relatable setting. Instead of, diving right into an adventure. There's no reason why he couldn't have. There's no reason why we couldn't have started with chapter 2 and explained all of this in various flashbacks, which, he does in Lord of the Rings all the time.
But it is interesting how much early 20th century fantasy literature and late 19th century fantasy literature started with, an ordinary character kind of entering into a world that they don't understand. Yeah. You think about like Narnia. Or even Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which we talked about a little about last time.
And to which this book was unfortunately compared.
Yeah.
So the tobacco thing.
Yeah, I like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
I just mean that it was unfortunately right.
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't think it's a fitting comparison, but
no, that's all I meant. It's a fantastic book. I wasn't criticizing Lewis Carroll or Alice in Wonderland. I don't think that the two. Really
there's really
the same type
there's really
of book.
not a whole lot of similarity.
It's fascinating work. I would think that Lewis Carroll was smoking something other than tobacco, actually.
Quite possible. Quite possible. Whatever that caterpillar had.
Exactly. The smoke rings. Take note of that because we're going to come back to some smoke rings later. Gandalf says, I don't have time to blow them, but we'll see him blow some smoke rings later.
That's right.
But now we get into that discussion of what an adventure is. How Bilbo views them, and
uncomfortable things, nasty,
very
disturbing,
uncomfortable.
things.
And look at why it's uncomfortable. What makes it uncomfortable? It's not it might cause me to lose a limb. It might cause me to die.
It might make you late.
I might be late for dinner.
Yeah.
In other words, even an adventure, even a nasty, uncomfortable thing, for him, is so small that the worst it does is make you late for dinner. So for him, an adventure, quote unquote, would be, I don't know, taking a walk so long that you can't get back in time for dinner.
That's true.
I mean, really. So even his vision of what an adventure is still small, just like the rest of his world.
Yeah. It also makes me wonder, just how charmed his life is that being late for dinner is like the worst thing he can imagine.
Yeah,
which
his
I guess
life is pretty
it's
charmed.
kind of two different takes on that sentence.
That's true.
But it's like he can't even fathom the idea that he might be burned up by a dragon.
Oh goodness, no! That's not even it.
That's not even. Yeah, yeah.
That would be like me thinking that I could end up on Mars.
Right.
It's literal.
No, it is not
going to
happen. It's not in the cards. It's not even in the casino. It's just
yeah. It's you're talking about something that's not a physical possibility, and
and that's
from Bilbo's perspective, that kind of thing would never even appear in his mind.
Yeah.
So at this point, he kind of starts ignoring Gandalf.
Takes out his
kinda
morning letters.
Checking out his mail.
That's great.
Well, let's see. I've got a bill here from my cell phone. I've got my rent's due. Oh wait, I don't have any rent. HOA fees. Okay, and then then he says good morning again, but he says it in an entirely different meaning.
An entirely different way. Yep, and Gandalf challenges that too.
Well, and the narrator tells us specifically what he meant this time.
By this, he meant that the conversation is at an end. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things about that I love. First of all, you might try over the hill or across the water.
Yeah, someplace else.
Where all those weirdos live, in that exotic, faraway place at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, a mile or so away.
Right. But then Gandalf picks it right up on that, what a lot of things you do use good morning for.
It's the language thing.
Yeah,
Tolkien's a philologist.
He's
Words have
challenging
meaning.
that language. Yep.
But Bilbo trying to stay polite, not at all.
Oh, not at
well,
all.
Let me see. Who are you, by the way?
Right. And Gandalf
so we get
immediately inverts the not at all by saying yes,
Exactly.
yes, my dear sir. Yep.
Yes, does it twice.
Yep. Challenges to language. It's so
love
cool
that.
the way he does this.
I love that. And after that famous line that we remember from the film as well, because again, Ian McKellen delivered the line beautifully about as if I was selling buttons at the door. Well, his problem, of course, is he wasn't selling Prancing Pony podcast buttons, which we have available
to members of the Fellowship
to
of the
members
Podcast.
of the Fellowship of the Podcast. We may make those available, for sale for our non-patrons at some point.
I think we should do that, yeah.
Yeah, we just have to figure out how to do a storefront. So.
Yeah. What is it about selling buttons at the door? Was that a look down upon profession?
I know. That's what I'm thinking. Well, is that like higher or lower than selling vacuum cleaners at the door?
I wonder.
Not that they had those in the Shire. Though why not? Half his floors are tiled and carpeted. He probably needed one.
Well, they've got engines coming out of tunnels. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
It's as if I was a door-to-door salesman. Right?
I know. I get it. I think it's funny that it's buttons. It's such a simple thing. Like, I cannot imagine somebody coming door to door selling me buttons. I can imagine somebody coming door to door trying to sell me, pest control service or encyclopedias or something. But
encyclopedias. Oh,
I'm dating myself with that one. I know.
Yeah, you are.
They used to have paper versions of Wikipedia that were in it was like 30 hardbound books, and you'd have to put them on a shelf, and a lot of
they
people
never
sold
got
them
edited.
And they never got edited.
You just had to buy a new version in a few years.
Right.
And they took up an entire shelf.
They were called encyclopedias, kids.
World Book. I remember reading them when I would go to my grandparents, and boy, I'm not only dating myself by saying I was reading the World Book, but I'm also completely pointing out my nerddom, because the highlight of my time would be pulling the World Books off the shelves and reading the encyclopedias.
My grandparents had World Books as well, and I used to read them all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Just pick them up, open it at random, and just read.
And just start reading. Exactly.
We are nerds.
We really are. But you're a nerd with a paragraph to read.
I am. All right. Gandalf. Good gracious me. Not the wandering wizard that gave old Took a pair of magic diamond studs that fastened themselves and never came undone till ordered. Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties about dragons and goblins and giants and the rescue of princesses and the unexpected luck of widows' sons. Not the man that used to make such particularly excellent fireworks. I remember those. Old Took used to have them on Midsummer's Eve. Splendid. They used to go up like great lilies and snapdragons and laburnums of fire, and hang in the twilight all evening. You will notice already that Mr. Baggins was not quite so prosy as he liked to believe. Also that he was very fond of flowers. Dear me, he went on, not the Gandalf who was responsible for so many quiet lads and lasses going off into the blue for mad adventures. Anything from climbing trees to visiting elves, or sailing in ships, sailing to other shores. Bless me, life used to be quite you used to upset things badly in these parts once upon a time. I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business.
In business. I do love that.
I know, still in business, yeah. You just imagine Gandalf having business cards,
Gandalf. The Gray.
Ideal in adventures.
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of a clever 1-800 number for him, but I can't. Or an email address, you know. Gandalf the Grey at whitecouncil.com. You know, and of course, you know, it'd probably follow typical corporate email patterns. It would be like, you know,
it would be like G. O'Loren.
Yeah, exactly. G. Mithrandir.
Yeah. G. _Graham at.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
Yeah. At Istari.com. No,
there you
probably
go.
an edu. Or definitely an org. Definitely an org.
Yeah. It's certainly
Istari.org.
nonprofit. Yeah, an org makes much more sense. Istari.org. You know, that might be a domain that's available. Istari.org.
Not now.
Not now, but somebody's going to snap that up. Oh, goodness. You know, one of the things I love about this passage is how different Bilbo recognizes how radically different Gandalf is. You know, this is a guy who's totally unlike the hobbits.
Yeah, yeah.
He not only does these magical things, right, like makes the diamond studs, but he tells stories, and they're stories about wild adventures, dragons, goblins, giants, the rescue of princesses, and I love this last one, the unexpected luck of widows' sons.
Boy, that's a bit of foreshadowing, isn't it?
Isn't that a bit of foreshadowing? You know, yeah, and the whole idea of luck really does start there, doesn't it?
It does.
The mundane things like fireworks, as opposed to the magical things like the diamond studs. This is a reminder of how different Gandalf is. You know, you talked about how he nails Bilbo down in terms of the use of language. But if we look at the two of them, you know, we get Bilbo with his staid, predictable, very comfortable, simple life. Gandalf is a mystery. He arranges adventures and he tells stories, and he really makes stories.
They're legends. You know people hear about these stories. And
he's making things happen that become stories. People going off into the blue for these mad adventures, including sailing, which we know to hobbits is something that's
something they do not do. Yeah, sailing to other shores, indeed.
Like, are you crazy?
Yeah,
what kind of crazy people do what you talk about?
Right. Yeah.
It's a really great insight into that difference between those two.
Yeah, but you get here a very subtle conflict between the Took and the Baggins side.
Yep.
The Took side says, life used to be quite interesting, and he catches himself before he says the word interesting.
I love that.
And then the Baggins, his Baggins side comes in and corrects and says, you used to upset things badly. I love that. It's not only is it just a fun passage, it's a fun bit of dialogue, but you really see those two sides. And I mean, most importantly, you see now you've been told that Bilbo has this Tookish streak in him. Now you're seeing it.
Absolutely. And we also see that the Baggins or prosy side is not exclusive, that there is this sort of poetic side that loves to talk in these grand descriptions, the idea of the great lilies and snapdragons and laburnums of fire, and they hung in the twilight all evening. I don't describe fireworks that way. Apparently I'm very prosy. There was this really cool red one, and then boom, 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 there were like 7 at once.
Oh, and they're kind of like a circle,
blue.
But maybe not, but maybe like more like an ellipse,
And they kind of went, So I can't describe him like he does.
Right.
That's just not my style. So, we see that he really does have that conflict, that Baggins.
That poetic side,
Yeah, really good stuff. But, of course, he says, I beg your pardon. And once again, when it comes to a simple, civil pleasantry, Gandalf will not have it.
Yeah.
When he begs his pardon a second time, he actually tells him, yes, you have asked for something twice. My pardon. And I give it to you. Interesting. He is not deterred in his decision to choose Bilbo in any way.
No, that's true. That's true. None of this makes him wonder, is this guy really the guy for the adventure? I don't know. He knows he's got the right guy.
Yeah, I'm going to go so far as to do this for you, this thing you don't want me to do. Yeah. And Bilbo makes it very clear he doesn't want him to do it, but he still can't help but be polite, so he tells him to come to tea. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye.
I know.
And he's like, what did I just do?
And as soon as he's done, he does say that. Why did I ask him to tea? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But then he thought a cake or two and a drink of something would do him good after his fright.
His fright.
Just an encounter with an old man on his doorstep, you know?
Who wants to give him an adventure.
What is so frightening about that? I don't
be
know.
still my beating heart.
Right. Because he's just so comfortable that anything that threatens that.
Yeah, any threat to his comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely. But interesting, I do love the little bit of wisdom that we get that wizards, after all, are wizards. We don't, we aren't exactly told what sort of threatening thing Gandalf might do, but he didn't want to appear to be rude to him.
No, that's true. Yeah, you don't want to.
No.
It makes me think a little of Sam in the movie. Is like, don't turn me into anything unnatural.
Unnatural? No. I have a better idea for you. Mm-hmm. All right, so
isn't it actually? It's Roverandom, isn't it? That a lesser known non-Middle Earth story by Tolkien that actually starts with a wandering wizard getting angered at someone and doing something to them.
I believe so.
Yeah,
I do believe so.
It's been a long time since I read that one.
I know it's been a while since I have too. I have to admit, it's probably been a few years. Probably something I've only read twice, I think. Maybe even only once.
I think I've only read it once, yeah.
I mean, it's, some of the other works, Smith of Wootton Major, I've probably read that a half a dozen times.
I love that one. That's
Farmer Giles of Ham, I can't, numbers of times. Leaf by Niggle, I love that piece, and I've probably read that 15 or 20 times. Roverandom, not as many, but I think you're right. It is. It is. It's
the one I'm thinking of. Just taking a look at it here. But.
So wizards after all are wizards, and so what in the world? Total facepalm. I can't believe I did that. Let me go have something to eat. He's a stress eater. No wonder he's a little tubby.
No kidding. Yeah.
And a drink of something, I mean, I'm sure we could put air quotes around that. And a drink of something.
A drink of something, yeah. Something
very stiff.
Something from the cellar.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think he's going to be drinking coffee this time.
Yeah, he's not going to be having coffee or tea at this point.
No. So Gandalf, marks the door, and then walks away, just when Bilbo is finishing his second cake and thinking, well, at least I'm not going to get into an adventure. Yep. And sure enough, he'd forgotten, he didn't put a ringer on his calendar.
I love that. So, I do love that moment. It just reminds you how, this little imperfection Bilbo has that he just can't remember dates, appointments, if he doesn't write them down.
Like he has so much going on.
Right.
I mean, he's so busy with his social calendar and his work.
But it also kind of makes him kind of relatable because, man, I sure forget things if I don't write them down on my calendar.
Oh, totally. If I don't put it in my iCal, it does not happen. I was just at back to school night, and we had to sign up for parent-teacher conferences later in the year. And, so we had to sign up right then. And I'm like looking at my calendar and, I'm picking it in. But if I didn't write down what day and time I picked for my conference,
right.
I wouldn't go.
You just won't make it. You won't be there.
And that's bad.
Yeah.
I think that's bad if you're that parent and your kid's only in kindergarten.
Yeah.
You're going to get in trouble. So, yeah, I'm the same way. And that's, again, makes him totally relatable. And I love this because here's a word that kind of tells us it's an antonym of comfortable. He was flustered. He was too flustered to do anything of the kind.
Yep.
Really amazing stuff. So let's go ahead and see what happens next. Just before tea time, there came a tremendous ring on the front doorbell. And then he remembered. He rushed and put on the kettle and put out another cup and saucer and an extra cake or two and ran to the door. "I'm so sorry to keep you waiting," he was going to say, when he saw that it was not Gandalf at all. It was a dwarf with a blue beard tucked into a golden belt and very bright eyes under his dark green hood. As soon as the door was opened, he pushed inside, just as if he'd been expected. He hung his hooded cloak on the nearest peg, and, "Dwalin at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins at yours," said the hobbit, too surprised to ask any questions for the moment. When the silence that followed, I seriously what?
Yeah.
When the silence that followed had become uncomfortable, he added, "I'm just about to take tea. Pray come have some with me." A little stiff, perhaps, but he meant it kindly. And what would you do if an uninvited dwarf came and hung his things up in your hall without a word of explanation? I love that breaking of the fourth wall. That might be the best one right there.
That really is. That one is really good.
Because now he's not just addressing; he's asking you a question. He's asking you to engage.
Yeah.
This is as direct an invitation to identify with the character as you're going to get.
Yeah. Wouldn't you do the same thing?
Yeah.
And my first thought is, no, I wouldn't. But then if he
would invite him to tea.
But then if he just came inside and hung his things up,
he's already there. He's a little bigger than me.
Maybe be like, well, all right, just come in and come in and have an ale.
To drink?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Have a seat.
Yeah. Don't empty out my larder or anything, but you can, you can pour yourself
you
a mug from the
friends
cask.
Will do that. Yeah. I couldn't help it when I was reading the description that he has a blue beard tucked into a golden belt and bright eyes under his dark green hood. He needs somebody to do his colors. I mean, really,
that's
blue
really
beard
clashy,
and golden belt and dark green hood. If you've got the blue belt, maybe you just need to play off of that.
Or the golden belt, yeah.
No, the blue beard. Sorry, did I say belt? I meant blue beard.
Yeah.
You can't really change the beard. I mean, I'm assuming they don't. I don't know. Why does he have a blue beard?
Yeah, I've actually had a conversation with somebody on Facebook about that. And I wondered if he meant sort of a like a gray.
The gray that had become almost a blue?
Yeah.
Because it does seem, I mean, like, what do you, dye it? Or do dwarves have naturally occurring blue hair?
Right. Probably not, no.
Yeah, tucked into a golden belt.
I think I imagine kind of like, they have certain like cat breeds that they call, a blue, and they're really just like a gray, like a deep gray color.
Like a steel, sort of a kind of
like a steel, like a blue
like
steel.
A blue steel sort of, yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, dark green, golden, and blue. No, just come on, pick one, man.
No, yeah.
Because now I'm already confused.
This look is all wrong.
And this look is really all wrong. Dwalin, you just have to have a different color. You do. And we should do something with that blue beard.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Please forgive the hairdresser thing. I'm not mocking anyone. I'm just having a little bit of fun.
You're just doing your hairdresser.
I'm doing, I mean, hey, I'm a VO guy. I've got to have voices for everybody.
Exactly.
But yeah, what would you do if an uninvited dwarf came and hung his things up in your hall without a word of explanation? Well, I guess
I would. Sure. Why not?
Oh,
he's already inside, like you said.
Yeah. What do you do at that point? But boy, this really starts kind of a long decline, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and already we see that he's become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He's stiff. His his usual easygoing pleasantry delivery is just not. He's shaken up.
Totally.
But his heart's still there. He still meant it kindly.
Mm-hmm. He meant it kindly.
For now.
And I think that's a description. Well, yeah. We'll see.
But that says a lot about
how thin that veneer is.
But I think that's good because if we look closely at the pleasantries like we've been doing, and we kind of see through it and see it as kind of a superficial thing that he's not really thinking about. Here, this reminds us that it is something he's saying sort of superficially without thinking about it. But that doesn't mean that the sentiment isn't real. He is he is still a kind person. He's still a genuine person.
And that is important. You're right. Because, again, we're being asked to identify with him. Mm-hmm. And you really only want to identify with somebody you perceive as being kind.
Right.
So we're not going to read these, but, more dwarves show up. We get the old-looking dwarf with the white beard and the scarlet hood.
That'll be Balin.
Turns out to be Dwalin's brother, Balin. Mm-hmm. So he hangs his red hood up next to the green hood. Right. I'm going to stop with the colors because I'm never going to remember all of them.
I actually wrote them down in a notebook while I was doing this, and then I looked at that and I said,
Good
why?
For you.
Why? What am I ever going to do with this?
Seriously, are we going to... Oh, man. This is one of those things, we talked about in the movie episode, that this was actually good, that Tolkien, or that Jackson gave Tolkien's dwarves a little more personality early on.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of them he maybe went a little overboard with.
Yeah. Well, the axe out of his head was a little bit silly.
For Biffer, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So,
but it was good. It was good to kind of give them a little bit of definition.
Especially because you're going to be looking at them for such a long time.
Yeah, and we did talk about that.
And in the book, because they do play a smaller role, we don't need to know.
We don't
as
need
much.
to know them all very well. Yeah, they kind of act as a group for the most part. You know, they
really do. With
there
the
are
exception
actually
of Thorn,
times in the book where you'll get a bit of dialogue, and he just said one of the dwarves. You know, you don't even know which dwarf said it. And a lot of times,
or
you
even
do know
here,
which
we get said some of the dwarves. Yeah, it's you just don't know who they are. They're just a group of people.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting line, though, that Balin has to say, that I see they've begun to arrive already. That really, really throws Bilbo for a loop, doesn't it?
That flustered him badly. Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
So much
And
so
there's
that, in
another
fact,
one of those-
he forgot the correct thing to say.
Yeah. He just said thank you.
He just said thank
like,
you for... Yeah. He's
they have
flustered
begun
badly.
to arrive.
Yeah.
So flustered, that's another one of our antonyms for comfortable, right?
Yep, definitely.
So again, we just want to call that out. And
Yeah.
I love this line because I think it also just speaks to his comfort level as well as his propriety, his politeness, his friendliness, but also just things have to be done in a certain way. That he liked visitors, but he liked to know them before they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. Mm-hmm. There's a guy who likes to be in control. You know,
That's true.
who likes to run the show.
That's true, but I actually thought you were going to go with the last sentence about
he's
worried that the cakes might run short, and he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful. He might have to go without.
Yeah, that's his propriety as well, isn't
that's
it?
his propriety. He would do it, but man, he would not be happy about it.
No, he would not. Oh man! But you know, the dwarves are pretty bold to say what they want, right? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Bilbo says, "Come on in and have some tea," and Balin's like,
I'll have a
beer.
beer instead. Yeah,
Like,
I know.
Oh, and cake,
Yeah,
a seed cake if you have
seed cake
it.
if you have any.
Like, really? Wow. Okay. Not just whatever you have. You know, a glass of water would be fine. No.
Yeah.
Feed me.
Yep.
So yeah, you know, Bilbo goes off and you know, brings back a beer mug and gets some seed cakes, and he gets back, and of course that's when he finds out they're brothers. And then more dwarves show up, and now it's your turn. You get to introduce the hot dwarves.
Yes, with their blue hoods and their silver belts and yellow beards.
Yes,
It was
that's
two
right.
more dwarves.
Keely had a beard.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Not 5 o'clock shadow.
But he looked so handsome with the 5 o'clock shadow. Come on. It was two more dwarves, both with blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards, and each of them carried a bag of tools and a spade. In they hopped as soon as the door began to open. Bilbo was hardly surprised at all. "What can I do for you, my dwarves?" he said. "Keely at your service," said the one. "And Feely," added the other. And they both swept off their blue hoods and bowed. "At yours and your families," replied Bilbo, remembering his manners this time.
Well, of course.
"Dwalin and Balin here already, I see," said Keely. "Let us join the throng." "Throng?" thought Mr. Baggins.
Wow.
"I don't like the sound of that. I really must sit down for a minute and collect my wits and have a drink." He had only just had a sip, in the corner, while the four dwarves sat round the table and talked about mines and gold and troubles with the goblins and the depredations of dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand and did not want to, for they sounded much too adventurous, when, ding-dong-a-ling-dang, his bell rang again, as if some naughty little hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off.
Well, first let me say you did Ding Dong a Ling Dang really well. I didn't expect it to be musical.
Thank you. Well, it's a
I
bell.
also have a feeling that Mr. Baggins needs to talk with a professional about his drinking problem. I mean, I must collect my wits and have a drink again, and that he has to do it in the
It's
corner.
only because he hasn't actually had a chance to have that drink yet that he still needs
That's
it.
true. That's true. I'm criticizing him a little much. It's fun. Yeah, here we get, again, very much the Baggins side, because he does not want to understand what they're saying.
Right, I know, I love
he
that, yeah.
literally
It just
sticks his fingers in his ears and says,
Just
la,
said,
la, 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 la,
la.
I don't want to hear this. I
Yep.
don't want to know it.
Yeah.
Totally Bagginsy right
Yeah.
there. Very, and that makes sense. He's kind of back in his zone, right? I mean, he's not surprised. He's not flummoxed. He's not flustered. He's hardly surprised at all. So I shouldn't say he's not surprised. He's just not surprised very much. And he's back in his, polite response mode, and is able to remember his manners.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Throng. Throng
Throng was a little
that would
much.
throw me off, man. That's a little much.
That was a little. It's like, yeah, and I don't like the sound of that.
I don't really like the sound of that. I mean, it could have been worse. He could have misinterpreted and thought he said thong, which could be even worse. Dwarves in thongs, but this is Throng, and that was wrong.
No, that was wrong, and this part of the conversation has gone on too long.
Yeah, like a bad SNL skit.
I got to say, I'm proud of Feely and Keely for actually bringing some tools with them.
Yes. Well, they're the young dwarves, right?
Right.
We don't know that yet, but they are the young ones. And so it's not surprising that they bring the tools with them. But yeah, we'll see that everybody...
Because usually it's my experience that the youngest person in the group is the least prepared.
Oh, I just mean they're the ones who got stuck with them.
Oh.
I don't necessarily mean they're the ones who planned ahead.
You think it was it was an assignment. Okay, got it. Yeah,
that's
makes
correct.
Sense.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
Thorin said, you, Feely, Keely, you carry these.
That does make more sense. I was like, man, these guys are prepared.
Oh, man. So he gets to the door again, and there's more. And this time we get Dori, Nori, Ori, Owen, and Glowin, and we're going to touch on that in just a moment.
Yep.
And so we get more colored hoods, 2 purples, a gray, a brown, and a white. Again,
it's almost become a
total
throng.
Mismatch.
No, yeah, no,
Huh?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I was just,
total mismatch.
I was looking at the next sentence where it's already almost become a throng.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, once again, they're all shouting their orders like they're in some, diner. Some for ale, some for porter, one for coffee. I mean, it's just, come on.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But yeah, just, they keep on coming. They just keep on coming.
Yep.
There's another knock, and now he's really ticked. But before we get to that, let's have that sidebar on Owen and Glowin.
Yeah. Well, we might get some questions or some comments about our pronunciation of the dwarves' names. I think Owen and Glowin out of Thorin's company are probably the most contentious. Elsewhere, we'll have they haven't been introduced yet. We're about to meet Thrain, and later on we'll meet Dain. And anybody who's read the book knows these names. But there's a lot of confusion as to how to pronounce these names. I have actually been following the advice given by, I have to give a shout out to the Tolkien professor Corey Olson. There's a podcast he did back in 2014 that he devoted to pronunciation of Dwarvish names, and some others too. I think he talked a little bit.
I thought we went into detail.
I know, right? Yeah. He did say that we had maybe rushed the Silmarillion by only doing it in 50 episodes.
By only doing 38 episodes in 70 hours?
Right, yeah, whatever it was.
Oh, man.
But yeah, he went into a lot of it, and he also went into not just the dwarves, but a lot of the names in the Hobbit, like Thranduil and things like that.
Right.
But for purposes of right now, basically his position on it is this: it's Owen and Glowin, not Oin and Gloin. The reason being that the OI is not a diphthong. It's not 2 vowels pronounced together. It's it's 2 separate syllables.
2 separate, right.
Mm-hmm. This is actually proven by a story that we talked briefly about last time, which is that when Tolkien told this story to his children, the boys actually made up a parody version of it and kind of made fun of some of these names.
Right.
And I think we talked about some of them, like Ollum, and I can't remember what name they came up with for Gandalf, but some of the characters that they came up with were Blowin' and Goin'.
Blowin' and Goin'.
But that tells you that, when they heard their father tell the story, he said Owen and Glowin'. I mean,
Owen and Glowin'.
Because I know if I was a kid and he had said Oin and Gloin, I would have gone with like groin and maybe loin.
Oh my goodness!
But,
man!
But no,
of course you would have.
And in fact, when you get to Lord of the Rings, you actually see that that Glowin's name, particularly because he's actually mentioned, he's at the Council of Elrond.
Right.
His name actually has an accent over the O. There's an acute accent over it to show that it's not a diphthong, to show it's a
separate
syllable.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Following this model, Professor Olson says that it's also Thrain and Dain when we get to those characters. Now, this is another one. A lot of people say Thrain and Dain. I've even heard people... I have. Well, it's common, and I've even heard people say thrine and dine because of it being an AI and how many AIs you get in the Elvish languages. But
yeah, these aren't Sindarin though. So
exactly. And I've always said no, that's completely out because these are
that one's right out.
Right.
Yeah,
this one is right out. Actually, Professor Olson says, I can understand it because I won't go into his argument, but he says, I can understand how people get to that. He says, but it's definitely not Thrain and Dane. And he says, and anyway, I think it's Thrain and Dane for all of this. So, so that's what we're going to be following. I was actually happy to hear that.
We're trying to follow.
We'll try.
I mean, I tried to pronounce Taniquetil, and I've only very rarely was able to do it.
Yeah.
So if I devolve into saying gloin and oin.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Belaghost, all that other stuff.
But no, we will try. But I want to make it clear to everybody why we're not saying thrine and dine because that one I really don't see.
No, we're not going there.
But no, I mean I was happy to hear that. He's really kind of worked it out in terms of why it makes sense. But that's why we're saying it that way. If you hear us say it that way.
Yeah, if you manage to hear us say it that way.
If we manage to say it that way, that's why we're doing it.
If we say it correctly.
And I will just say I have said it that way for a while, so it might be a little bit more natural to me.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll still mix it up.
Oh, goodness. So now as we see these other dwarves join the party, now the door, somebody's knocking, and Bilbo's lost it at this point. He is ticked.
He's angry, isn't he? I mean, that very angry.
The text describes him as very angry. And he's bewildered and bewothered. Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard the word bewildered. I have to say bewothered is something that I had not heard.
That's a new one. Yeah.
But I love this next line, that this was the most awkward Wednesday he ever remembered.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Isn't that great? Mm-hmm. I mean, such
an understatement.
Yeah, it really is. And yet again, I think it's this way of, well, first of all, kind of maybe telling us how small his world is, but just making it very accessible. Mm-hmm. Kind of bringing it down to kind of a normal scale. Most awkward Wednesday he ever remembered. I'm sure he had a more awkward Thursday, but this was the most awkward Wednesday he ever remembered.
He certainly did.
I love that.
Yeah. That's great. And let's focus on that word awkward as an antonym for comfortable.
Exactly.
Something
that
that's
is
awkward
exactly right.
An awkward silence is an uncomfortable silence. An awkward feeling.
It is an uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. This is the most uncomfortable Wednesday he'd ever remembered. Mm-hmm. So he opens the door, and 4 more come in, and there's Gandalf. And Gandalf's the first thing he does is criticize Bilbo for taking too long to answer the door.
Yeah, I know.
And he introduces the rest of them, of course, and that includes Thorin. Big difference from the film there. They hang up their
That's true, yeah.
hoods, 2 yellows, pale green, sky blue with a long silver tassel. We're given the fact that Thorin is an enormously important dwarf.
And that's why he has a long silver tassel, right?
It's exactly right, and it's why he is very haughty and says nothing about service.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit here, and then we'll discuss. We're actually getting fairly near to the end of this particular episode, so I want to make sure we get through this, though. Now we're all here, said Gandalf, looking at the row of 13 hoods, the best detachable party hoods, and his own hat hanging on the pegs. Quite a merry gathering. I hope there is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me. And for me, said Thorin. And raspberry jam and apple tart, said Biffer. And mince pies and cheese, said Beaufort. And pork pie and salad, said Bomber. You kind of wonder, by the way, an aside, what in the world is Bomber eating salad for? This is Bomber. Really? He's the one who asks for salad? I'm surprised he didn't ask for a Diet Coke.
He's going on a long journey. Maybe he's trying to get in shape.
I guess. And then here's one of those moments where it's the other dwarves,
Yeah.
And more cakes, and ale, and coffee if you don't mind, called the other dwarves through the door. Put on a few eggs, there's a good fellow, Gandalf called after him, as the hobbit stumped off to the pantries, and just bring out the cold chicken and pickles. Seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself, thought Mr. Baggins, who was feeling positively flummoxed, and was beginning to wonder whether a most wretched adventure had not come right into his house. By the time he had got all the bottles and dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and things piled up on big trays, he was getting very hot and red in the face and annoyed. "Confusticate him to bother these dwarves," he said aloud. "Why don't they come and lend a hand?" Positively flummoxed.
Wow.
Confusticate and bebother, which, by the way, I absolutely love that phrase.
Oh, such a great, that's a great phrase that I think we all have learned from this book.
Yeah.
Annoyed.
Yeah. And then, of course, earlier we had the very angry, bewildered and bewildered. He is a mess.
Notice that he actually says confusticate and bebother these dwarves aloud. He's not just thinking it this time. Remember when Fili and Kili showed up, he was thinking,
right. He was thinking, wrong.
But now he's saying it aloud. This is that courtesy is that
it's gone.
veneer of courtesy is gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's mad.
And we've seen that he's kind of devolved into this. And,
yeah.
And it's all because of his comfort level, right? As his comfort level, with Fili and Kili, even when they said throng, he was able to maintain that semblance of propriety.
Well,
because
four dwarves is one thing.
Right, and he wasn't all that surprised, but now he's completely, now he's way past that point.
And wondering whether a most wretched adventure had not come right into his house.
And he hates adventures, so this is terrible. This is a terrible thing.
And I love that because, again, as we were talking about before, how Tolkien welcomes you into this world by letting you enter the door of the Hobbit hole. But then the Hobbit hole is still very familiar. We step into Bilbo's world, and it's still quite familiar to us. But then these dwarves step into Bilbo's world, and everything is turned upside down.
Yeah, and that's our world because we've gone in there.
Yep.
And now they're coming in.
Yep.
So
and
it's
that's
not like
more
we
about
have to
that relating to Bilbo, that identifying with Bilbo that you're talking about.
Yeah, and just like we would never feel like we belonged with the dwarves, Bilbo, we'll see very often, doesn't feel like he belongs with the dwarves. He's really the odd man out. His entire comfortable existence has been shattered in the space of a single dinner party.
Right. Yes, exactly.
It kind of makes you wonder how secure it was in the first place, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So then he, of course, asks them if they want to stay to supper.
You almost think there's a bit of satire there. I don't think there really is, but it almost feels that way.
It does, doesn't it?
Just because it's like, wow, it took so little to just completely reduce Bilbo to
shatter him
to this. Yeah.
I mean, even his appetite. We have seen how much he loves food. But look at this. He sat on a stool at the fireside, nibbling at a biscuit. His appetite was quite taken away. That says a lot about what's going on in Bilbo's mind. What's his state of mind right now? He's literally lost his appetite. And for a hobbit, that is saying something.
Weird. Yeah, that's That's uncomfortable.
So, yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And, so even after tea, right, he goes to start collecting all the plates and glasses. I don't know what makes him say, I suppose you'll all stay to supper, but he does. And
I think the Baggins, the Baggins comes back. I think you're right. It's not, he hasn't gotten accustomed to it, but he's regained the courtesy. He's found his courtesy again.
Yeah, this is, I think, more of a veneer. I think it really is. Because you see, there's this line about he's trying to look as if this was all perfecally ordinary.
Yeah, no, that's true. It is definitely a veneer. Yeah. But it's on autopilot. I mean, this is just, he's so used to doing this that he just does it without, even when it's not in his own best interest, or what he thinks is his own best interest right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking I would say, well, I suppose you might all come back in a few years, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
You're all welcome to come back on another awkward
see you guys
Wednesday.
In 5 years.
Right, exactly. But instead, Thorin says, no, we're going to have some music first. And this is interesting. All the dwarves, well, except for Thorin, get up and start cleaning the thing, cleaning the plates and everything. We get the wonderful song about, it's hard to say blunt the knives, bend the forks, chip the glasses, crack the plates, because I get the music version, I get the movie version mixed up with the text version right here.
Did they switch that? Okay.
They did. They went AABB in the film. Blunt the knives, bend the forks, smash the bottles and burn the corks, chip the glasses and crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I wonder
so
why they changed that.
Yeah.
I
don't know. It's not the end of the world. I mean, everything else was the same. I mean, the same words about cutting the cloth and treading the fat and pouring the milk on the pantry floor. All that's there.
Yeah.
Except for the last part about carefully with the plates. Yeah, I mean, it was otherwise faithful and in terms of the film, certainly a fun moment. I'm
I didn't
sure
even pick
a
up
lot
on
of
the fact
people
that they had changed it, but that's a good catch.
well, because the rest of the words are all right. It was
Yeah.
just the rhyming pattern changed. So let's see.
I do like that. Of course, they did none of these dreadful things.
Right, exactly. They were teasing him.
Yeah.
They were poking fun.
Yeah. But again, you think about if that's dreadful. I mean, hey, I don't like
Yeah,
broken
you're
plates.
right.
I don't like broken plates either. But
No, I'd hardly call that dreadful.
right, exactly. Yeah. And I also don't
a very
have
good
Bilbo's
point.
means to go out and buy new plates. If I break the ones I've
seriously.
got, I'm stuck with broken
Bilbo
plates
would be
for a
like,
while.
whatever, I'll buy some more
Right.
plates. I mean, man, I've got the money.
Right. If I chip plates, I'm eating on chipped plates for a little while.
Seriously, maybe 5 years.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
until somebody's bleeding, the
Until
plate's
polite
not
company
broken
comes
enough.
over, and I don't mean dwarves.
Or wizards, for that
Wizards,
matter.
for that matter.
So now we get the reappearance of the smoke rings.
yeah.
Thorin's blowing smoke rings, and they're really big, and they go wherever he wants them to go. But Gandalf is now doing smoke rings too, and he's hunting Thorins. He blows these little small smoke rings that go straight through Thorins, and then they come back and hover over his head.
Yeah.
This is really pretty trippy stuff.
Yeah.
And I love this description. In the dim light, it made him look strange and sorcerous.
I do love that. Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
It's cool because, I mean, obviously he's using something that we would call magic to do this.
Yeah.
Obviously, knowing more about the legendarium, you probably wouldn't call it that. But
No.
But within the context, like, this is the way that, Gandalf the Wizard's magic manifests itself here. Is to blow
it's
these,
like the
to
fireworks.
blow
It's
these
something
boomerang
kind of
smoke rings.
mundane.
Right.
It's mundane, but done in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Done in a way that couldn't be done by anybody else.
Right.
Really cool little
What do you
scene,
think of the
and I
fact that
love
it's
that it
hunting
makes him look
Thorins?
sorcerous.
Do you think there's anything to that?
Nah, just a little. It seems like they're a little threatening. It's like they're playing a
Just
game.
to play, yeah, like a game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. It's not like Gandalf's trying to, I'm going to hunt you down, Thorin.
Right.
Yeah, no, but so then they're going to get music, and
But
we're going
Bilbo,
to
of course,
actually.
is completely just embarrassed of the smoke rings he'd been so proud of earlier.
Oh, yeah, he's like,
That's
wow,
the real
I thought
competition here. The unspoken competition is Bilbo realizing, oh, wow.
Isn't it? Bilbo's like, wow, I guess I better not blow any more smoke
Yeah.
rings because I'm pretty pathetic
Right,
at that.
right.
So now we're going to get some music, and we're going to actually break at this point. But before we break, I want to point out just the musical instruments, because we'll pick up next time with the line that says the dark came into the room from the little window. But for now, just they bring out their bags and they get these instruments. Okay, I get bringing out flutes or maybe even a small fiddle.
Sure.
I'm a little stunned that Bomber can produce a drum, and that Thorin comes back with a harp, and that
Dwalin and Balin have
Balin
vials as big as themselves.
vials as big as themselves. Now maybe they have a magic bag of holding plus one
Could
or
be.
something.
Could be.
But it's
I know.
just, that's a little interesting. Maybe we'll talk more about that next time. I don't know what to make of that, Sean. Is it?
I don't know that I've ever seen any real, literal explanation of what's going on here. I think
It just seems like it's part of the story.
I think Tolkien's just
it's
having fun with the story. I think, if anything,
Yeah.
it's probably just another sign that there's a little bit of another sign that this is sort of a kid's story, kind of a lighthearted story.
Yeah, yeah, lighthearted. I think you're right.
And it's something that
That makes
it's
sense.
sort of absurd,
It is,
but in kind of a mundane way, kind of a subtle way.
yeah, absolutely.
He's having a little fun.
I can't wait to get to the next episode to finish up this chapter and hear us talk about at the beginning the Misty Mountains Cold.
Looking forward to that.
So, yeah, great discussion, Sean. And folks, please be sure to join us again in 2 weeks when we will record in the dark for dark business. Now, before we wrap up with a question or two from Bartleman's Bag, if you believe we've earned your support here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we'd ask you to consider joining our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. We've set up some really amazing goals, like our move to weekly episodes, and we are getting close to that. So, you want to listen to us every week, we can get through the Hobbit really quick and
yeah.
probably be in Lord of the Rings by spring if we move to weekly episodes. So We're close to that. And, we also have some really cool rewards, too.
Yeah, and we do want to take a moment to thank those of you who have already joined that Patreon campaign and joined what we've dubbed the Fellowship of the Podcast. You all are helping to make this show even better.
Absolutely.
And we want to give a very special shout out to Maya from Michigan, who's a patron at the Kierdan's contribution tier. And if you would like a personalized shout out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go.
Indeed, you do. And while your patronage is really, truly appreciated, we don't want you to feel obligated at all. Only if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it, do we want you to consider signing up.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, just keep enjoying the podcast, because we're going to keep making
it, and it'll continue to be free. So
yes, it will.
One other place where we could use a little help is on a survey from our podcast host. It's a really short survey, and it's basically just helping us understand our audience a little bit better. We promise that we will stop mentioning this once we've had 250
yes,
people complete the survey. So please visit survey.libsyn, that's Libsyn, that's B as in boy, Lib as in boy, SYN.com/theprancingponypodcast, and help us out, please.
Please. Now, the demographic data you fill out, your income level, ethnic group, whatever, all of that is collected in aggregate. We don't know any of that about you individually. And your email addresses only come to us. Libsyn doesn't get those. So what are we going to do with those email addresses? Well, once we have those 250 surveys, we're going to do a drawing from all the email addresses. We're giving away a copy of the new Beren and Luthien book and a first edition facsimile edition of The Hobbit. We're asking... once we won't be able to know from the email addresses, but we're asking that this be for U.S. residents only, just because of the cost of shipping. But if we draw your email and you're overseas and want to cover that part of it, you're welcome to.
Yep.
But otherwise, we're going to be saying, hey, we'll move on to another name until we get another U.S. resident.
Yep.
But check out our show notes for a link if you missed the link to the survey. And then, Sean, do we have any questions in Bartleman's bag this time around?
Yeah, we've got two that I think we can get through really quickly in the time we've got left. So I'm just going to jump right in. The first one is actually from Maya in Michigan, who I just named, one of our patrons. And remember that priority handling of questions to Bartleman's bag is one perk of joining the fellowship. At the Legacy of Lothlorien level or higher, and you know how Bartleman can be with the mail. So,
wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yep. So Maya writes, in the Council of Elrond, it was stated that the 3 elven rings remained independent of Sauron because he had no part in their making, and his hand never touched them or sullied them. But it is also stated that if Sauron regained the ruling ring, he could use it to dominate the 3, which of course we all know. Furthermore, if the ring is destroyed, the 3 would lose their power. My question is, if Sauron had no part in their making, and his hand never touched or sullied them, why was the fate of the 3 tied up with the fate of the 1? And Alan, I wanted to give you this one, so I think you've got something on it, don't you?
Yeah, I do. It's a good question. I think the answer is in the Silmarillion. We just need to read between the lines a bit. Sauron made the One Ring, quote, to rule all the others, and then also he made it, quote, a thing of surpassing potency. Those are both right in the text of Otrapata, as we called it, of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, in our last couple of chapter walkthroughs. So clearly, Sauron made the One Ring with this intention of giving it power over all the rings. Now, remember, and we get this, I think, from Unfinished Tales, that Sauron taught the Gwaith-i-Mirdain, that was the guild of these makers, these craftsmen, much of what they knew. And, quote, he guided their labors and he was aware of all that they did. So even though he didn't touch the 3 rings, he certainly had knowledge of how they worked, of their function and how they did what they did.
Right, that makes sense.
The elves were working from Sauron's designs in the first place. And if they made any changes, he was aware of them because he was aware of all that they did. So even though he didn't make them himself, he knew enough about how they were made to know how to design a ruling ring that would control them. Now, we don't know how those details work out. Tolkien doesn't tell us. But it's not really a stretch that with that sort of knowledge of how they worked, he could create a ring that would control them and that their fate would be wrapped up in it. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is kind of a silly analogy, but it's almost like Sauron was a master hacker who knew where the back door was in the Elven Rings because he wrote the original program. You know, it
was a day one hack there. A day one vulnerability.
Yeah,
he must have had something to do with this Equifax hack.
Oh, he did.
Thanks a lot, Dark Lord.
Yeah.
Now I got to do credit freezes now. You said we had 2 questions, though. What was the other one?
Yeah, we've got another one that's very appropriate for this episode, and this is from our old friend Tarek in Chicago. This time, Tarek writes in asking, I once read somewhere that perhaps the name Hobbit had something to do with hobbits being creatures of habit. While I can completely see that, I always thought that at least originally they may have had something to do with rabbits, not only because of the obvious phonetic resonance, but also because they lived in holes in the ground. And I think, we've seen some of Bilbo being a creature of habit. I guess we haven't really used that word, but, his comfort and things like that. So it's a good question. And what I think on this one, Tarek, is I think this is a place where a lot of things went into the soup. The soup in this case being the name Hobbit. And I don't think even Tolkien himself knew exactly how the name popped into his head. We know that he was if you've listened to our episode 20 with Dimitra Femi and Andrew Higgins about the Secret Vice, I mean, you know how he felt about sound symbolism, the fact that words should sound like what they mean. It's quite possible that the word Hobbit just felt right for any reason above, or for none of those reasons. Maybe it felt right because BBIT sounds like something that lives in the ground. I don't know. It could have been any of those things, or it could have been none of those things. But I don't think it was intentional.
No.
And specifically, the word habit that Tarek asks about, I've never heard anywhere that Tolkien was intentionally playing on the word habit. There was a case where somebody wrote into the Observer newspaper in 1938 and signed the letter Habit, and who made some speculations on where Tolkien might have gotten the idea for hobbits. Tolkien actually responded to this, and his response was published in the newspaper. And in his response, he made a pun on habit and hobbit. Just in the interest of time, I'll just say, if you want to read up on this, letter 25 in Carpenter's letters collection.
That's what I was going to ask, is what letter is it? Yep,
letter number 25. But that's the only connection that I've ever heard of, is when Tolkien made this sort of pun on habit and hobbit. I definitely don't think it was something he was thinking of when he wrote the book. His response basically said that hobbits were not inspired by any of the things that Habit had suggested. And the reason I'm saying that is because he also added, nor indeed was he like a rabbit. He was a prosperous, well-fed young bachelor of independent means. So I think we have an answer to the question of both habit and rabbit. I don't think either of them was an intentional inspiration.
And no, that didn't stop many people from making a connection between hobbits and rabbits, and partly because they lived in holes, and
true, yeah.
I think possibly because of all those comparisons to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which we talked about last time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, lots of inspirations have been proposed over the years, but, one of the last things Tolkien had to say about it very late in life, it was 1971, and this is letter 319. He wrote that the word hobbit was his own invention, and he said that the only English word that influenced the invention was hole. That granted the description of hobbits, and then he went on to say that the troll's use of rabbit, when in the next chapter they call him nasty little rabbit, was merely an obvious insult. So I think that's pretty conclusive. He really wasn't intentionally basing it on, any word except for maybe hole.
Yeah, I agree.
And we get that in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, great questions, Maya. Tarek, thank you so much for taking the time to send those in. Folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, thank you very much for joining us. Be sure to join us again in 2 weeks when we finish the first chapter of The Hobbit.
And I'm personally looking forward to finding out what this dwarvish plot is all about, seeing that become all plain and clear.
Absolutely. Folks, we do want to encourage you to read along and take notes in your own copy of The Hobbit, so check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. Sean's worked really hard to update that page, and we've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to some really good stuff for your Tolkien collection.
And also, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd really be grateful for that. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to a bigger and a more vibrant and exciting Tolkien community.
And that is what we're all about.
Yep.
Make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to our podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in most any podcast directory, or if you like your podcast the old-fashioned way, the RSS feeds on our website. And by the time this episode airs, Apple will be supporting some new RSS tags that allow us to better organize the show into seasons, marking bonus episodes as being different from the main episodes, telling them that it's serialized instead of episodic, so that the first episode of the season is at the top instead of at the bottom. So if you're really super organized, you're going to want to use Apple's new podcast app to follow us.
That sounds pretty exciting. And
iOS 11.
Yeah. And we do want to thank all of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everyone could join. And that's why we have the online common room on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
Definitely. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your confustications and bebotherings to barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Folks, that's a new email address, it was new the last episode, but it's still new enough we want to bring that to your attention. Be sure to jot that down, barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get them into our next episode. Well, what an hour, almost an hour 45 is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.